Live. Hi everyone, I'm really excited to interview Federico Negro, CEO of Canova. And this interview is special for me for a couple of reasons. First is Federico is also from UOFI, University of Illinois. Second is Federico co-founded Case, and he was head of design, a senior vice president at WeWork. And a lot of AEC tech folks I admire have either worked at Case or have either worked at WeWork. So there are a lot of stories I would like to unpack in this interview. And also, I read a lot of entrepreneurial books, and especially I remember a quote from a book called Super Founder that the founders who typically start the second company and have first company as $1 million evaluation, the second company is supposed like is highly possible to have $1 billion evaluation. And highly speculate Canova is a very promising product, and I really look forward to that development. So thanks a lot, Federico, to be on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me. No pressure, by the way.
Yeah. So, Federico, can you walk us through your professional journey and a bit about your background, where you grew up, and out of all things you could do in life, why you chose architecture?
Of course. So I grew up in South America, in Uruguay, actually. My family moved around a lot when I was a kid. I'm the youngest of four. So I lived in many places in Venezuela, where I spent a lot of my time in the early 80s, in Argentina as well, and then of course in Uruguay also. Most of my family is made up of engineers, and my mother, who is in literature and the arts, I don't know, I think had a big influence on me. And so somehow the mix of the arts and engineering sort of fell down in architecture. I'm also, I think, I probably don't show this part of myself very much, but I also love drawing and sketching. I actually kind of wanted to be an animator, but but where I came from, it's like that wasn't a real profession, and so if you know how to draw, you become an architect, and so that's what I picked. It's kind of one of those things where I was both fascinated by it, but I also just never really questioned it from very early on. I was like, yeah, I'm going to study architecture. That just kind of fit. And then technology was just something I did for fun. So from a very early age, I was always I was a gamer. I was always to this day I still play. I was always had my foot in it, and so although I really aspired to this physical thing, I also really liked and enjoyed this digital thing. So yeah, so that's that was my upbringing, and then it so happened that in the mid 90s, I found myself living in Chicago in one of these moves that my family made. And so I finished high school there, and I ended up going to Illinois for undergrad. There's a really great Bachelor of Architecture program there. I was definitely one of those kids who in high school went to like different camps to see which architecture school I was going to pick. And so I ended up there, which was great. It was very technical, for sure, but I really enjoyed it. Spent a lot of time on the history side of things, which was great. Took a bunch of engineering courses also, and then I would say actually the technical side, at least in the classes that I took, like technology side, and the design side were probably where I was yearning for more exposure. And so that's probably what landed me in New York after. I spent a lot of time in Europe studying history as well. Thought I was going to be an archaeologist for like a hot minute. Spent some time in Greece, spent some time in Italy, and then came back for graduate school. And I was like, I'm going to move to New York. And that's where I ended up at Parsons to do my MArch. At the time when you had people, like three of the shop partners were teaching there at the time, and a bunch of other like sort of really cool early. They had just finished Dunescape at the time, so there's a lot of sort of like really cool early digital stuff that was happening there. Um, and I got exposed to that, and that's actually where I ended up working. We had a program called the Design Workshop. We actually, at our second year of graduate school, we constructed a building, and then the team that was doing that, we were doing a studio in Aspen with the shop, where we were actually going to go over the summer to be on the field with part of it. That ended up being canceled. But anyway, I ended up working there. And so this throughout that whole time, we really got exposed to a lot of stuff that was happening in digital fabrication, and in a practice that was actually implementing a lot of that stuff in a very sort of meaningful way. And those guys were great. We had a ton of fun. We were tiny at the time. I think I came in a class of 5 in 2004. Before Katrina, that was like, I think it took the company from like 17 to 22 people or something like that. So I'm aging myself at the moment, which is fun. But anyway, so a lot of the stuff that was happening there at the beginning was just really exciting. And the technology, we use sort of technology as kind of a differentiating factor at the company for design and for delivery. And learned a ton. I'm sort of skipping through like huge chapters of my life. Learned a ton, and then ended up in Louisiana and New Orleans for a big portion of time during this period, right after Katrina, because we were doing some disaster relief there as part of shop. A couple of years after that, ended up right ahead of 2008, as the economy was beginning to collapse. That's when we had the idea to start Case with Dave and Steve. And anyway, the rest of it, we can go into it. But I think I was 26, 27 years old at the time when we split off, and we thought we already knew everything. We're quite naive, actually.
And like, I was reading about Case, and like, looked like you guys were quite ahead of its time when you were developing projects and the company around it. So can you walk us through like how was the brainstorming and the case ideation look like? Was it you and your co-founders were in a bar or a coffee shop discussing how to take it to the next level?
Yeah. So we saw a lot of the stuff that was happening with technology at the time was in many ways not so dissimilar to what is still happening in some respects, but in many ways very different. A lot of stuff that was happening with technology was enabling, let's say, smaller practices or newer practices to kind of take on more or to take on bigger, which was really cool. I'd probably say that the Beijing Olympics was one of probably the biggest shifts from a digital design and fabrication perspective in our whole industry. A ton of people that I really respect ended up in somehow or another involved in that, and it pushed a lot of things forward. And so this was before that, right? Even stories like Revit, like they had just been acquired. Like all of this stuff was really tiny. So Case saw its place as effectively a kind of change agent within the industry. We looked up to companies like IDEO and Frog and Red Antler, and companies, agencies like this that exist very much in the rest of the design community that help people use design and technology to solve real problems. And so this was very much an agency model, which means that it's a let's call it services model, right? It wasn't productized yet, which is really the only opportunity we had at the time. There was no prop tech in New York at that time in 2007 or 8. So we started with that, and very quickly, we got our first gig was like 20K. Then we got our second gig, which was like another 20K, and we had like already quit our jobs, right? So like this is all we had. We
Oh,
had no savings. We were young and just went all out. And people were like, oh, how did you guys make sure, how did you guys organize yourselves and all of that? And for us, it was really simple. It was, we knew we had enough money when we landed our first contract. We had enough money for basically a couple of months, 2 or 3 months amongst the three of us to get the next project. So immediately we already said, okay, Dave, you go sell. Steve and I are going to deliver this thing. And it was pretty natural from that perspective. The three of us were, looking back on it, we're super lucky in that I think we're very um, complementary to each other. And we were all learning. We were all at similar points in our careers, and so we were winging it, but in an informed way, I think. And that sort of mushroomed and ballooned into this thing over the ensuing 6 or 7 years that we were super proud of. We had this super amazing, okay, like genuine brand. We had about 60 or 70 people by 2015, which is when we were acquired. Spread all over the world. Our main office was in New York, but we had people all over the place, from Nebraska and Korea and London and Uruguay and Argentina and all kinds of different amazing places. And so we were actually remote first at the moment, like 10 years ago, more.
it's
And so, so we had to have this remote culture where even those who were in the office, we had all these sort of guidelines and things to make sure that everybody who was away felt very much, had the same experience. So even if you had somebody, let's say, that was in your same office, but there was a third person in that meeting that was online, we would all have the meeting online to make sure that the third person didn't feel like they were being left out. Like little things like that. There are things that I'll give Dave also a lot of credit. There was a lot of designing the experience that went into it, and that was both internal and external. We had our blog, we had our parties at AU, we had all of these kinds of things, which were designed to effectively do the one thing that I think Case was most well known for, which was to provide a home to this new type of practitioner that didn't yet have a home in firms yet. And we're like, look, you like, unless you want to go the traditional PE route or PA route, like what are you going to do? And some of the, like today we have stories of people being CTOs and head of digital practice, all these things. None of that existed back then. And so we'd like to, give a home to a lot of those folks. And I think how we organize ourselves internally also tried to drive that forward. We had a strategy consulting group, which was led by Steve, which basically all that it did was to tell company 15 years ago that, and this were like large enterprises, say 500 persons and up, in AEC, that if they didn't, that they really needed to, from a governance perspective, begin to address things like CTO roles, CIO roles, not as the person who was just making sure that your email service were running, but actually a strategic role. So these roles began to change from what we would call sort of bottom line roles, like making sure the ops of the business are working, which are still really, of course, really important, to top line roles, which the really good firms today have. These top line roles are drivers of growth. They're drivers of talent. They attract talent, they retain talent. The firms that have recognized these people, I think, are probably up and away doing some of the best work today. So we were helping firms specifically, reorganize themselves accordingly and implementing plans and all these things. We also had an implementation group. You have it on the screen, that taught folks how to implement some of the stuff. We sort of handheld them as they were going through this transition. We were doing all kinds of bespoke technology. This was about half of our business, definitely toward the end, and probably the reason why we ended up getting acquired, because we made one really good decision, which was to retain all IP of our code. always, and so it allowed us to always be able to spin up stuff for people, I think, a little bit quicker. There weren't a lot of software development companies who had AEC knowledge from the business knowledge, and so that combination made us really enticing to a lot of people. And then the projects group, which I actually ran for quite a while, where we would embed ourselves into these like very specific kind of project teams that were trying to do something big. So like working like mega projects on these kinds of things that other consultancies were doing as well. We're trying to do less and less of that. Somehow or another we kept getting pulled back in. It was probably me, but
I see. Like there are so many tangents I could go, but like I'm really curious to know, like since uh, this was like very new at the time to provide this kind of digital consultancy and like services, like what was the precedent for the business and financial model you had for that, or how did you guys figure it out? And initially, like you started with three, like, and what were the down points during this journey?
yeah, that's a great question. So we're proud to say that we we ran a really tight ship at Case. Our biggest product, which was completely internal and nobody ever saw, was we had a homemade ERP um, that tracked everything, and we were like really, really, really good about making sure that everything was on it. And so, like today you have things like Monograph, for example, that allow you to do all this stuff. I actually ended up being an early investor in Monograph because because I knew the problem so well. I was like, the second that came across my desk, I was like, I don't even need to see it. Yes, I'll invest, because it's tracking hours in any consulting business is the only way in which you are able to understand whether you're being profitable or not. And so I am proud to say that from day one, we had to run the company profitably. We had no choice, right? There was no investment. We didn't have any money ourselves to more than a month or two of rent. That was it. We were lucky enough that we did this at a time in our lives where I didn't have children at the time. I didn't have other responsibilities. It was just mostly me. But it was a big risk, and so everything we did, we had to be really cutthroat about it. Like, we had a very, very, very strong stance on like, we never did free work ever for anybody. We never, our marketing, all of those kinds of things that like people today I think still struggle. We're like spending all kinds of money to try to attract business. We were measuring everything and making sure that we were able to to track back um, how we were doing at any given time. That ERP was like we hooked it on to Tableau like super early on. We were like every meeting was run with like very clear sort of metrics as to how we're doing. We had an automatic uh, uh, proposal generator, so we had like really productized our services and our packages in such a way that like we were already thinking about products, right? We just didn't have a product model that we were thinking about productizing things. We're like, we have very specific packages that once you sort of signed on to them, everything downstream from that was 100% sort of like exactly repeatable from project to project, from account to account, from customer to customer. And we got to the point where actually through like Case Apps, which was a free set of tools, and a bunch of our software development, we even had the beginnings of our subscription model with us, which effectively was a help desk subscription. And that help desk subscription was designed to get us closer to the customer, but really it was designed to eliminate the valleys of the traditional peaks and valleys model of any services business, where it's like, you can cut a cross section about services companies in the US. You'd say, okay, like Q3 is usually really good for most of them. Q4 is terrible. Q1 is better. Q2 is like, somewhere in the middle. And that's even without, recessions and things like that, which they used to tell us, oh, it only happened every 20 years. Well, I've lived through three already and I'm only 41. So I don't, think the world is different now. And so we said we needed something that would engage our customers or bring our customers closer to us. And that was actually doing pretty well. We had whole team of people that were on this sort of like help desk for all kinds of different, computational design and BIM questions. And that was probably one of the most profitable parts of the business. And recurring. Like we didn't have to resell that revenue. Once we have it, we have it. So we learned a ton. It was 6 or 7 years that were amazing. We learned so much, and we learned about product and in a way that we hadn't before, which I think kind of opened the door for us to have the acquisition, because we were excited then about the prospect. I was like, oh, wait a minute, like what if we were a product business? We had never really considered it before, because we were always taught that like, you provide services. That's what we do. We're professionals. And then we sort of learned to forget that, which took a while. It took the better part of a decade to erase it.
I see. And looking back at the case years, is there any product or idea you wish you could have worked or you wanted to work?
No, like I think one of the things we're most proud of is the team. Like I'd say the case's most successful product was its brand, and its brand was its team. That's it. Like everything else is kind of secondary to that. And it really taught us, and hopefully it taught everybody else, that no matter where you go, no matter what you do, like you got to focus on team. That's it. Like your team is everything. Your team is the most valuable part, especially if you're in services. So I don't know. I don't like zero regrets. Even the acquisition for me was amazing, because I always said we never got to see Case struggle, which is such a like, such a benefit. Case was alive for 7.5 years or something, and like I think we had like a total of like 3 bad months in that whole period. Like that was an like, amazing run. And so, yeah, everything else was secondary to that, to be frank, and then to be able to also like kind of go out on top, if you will, and never had to have like, hit a serious recession where we had to contract, where our customers were contracting, which meant that we had to contract and had to like, that would have been really tough. So I'm glad that we get to keep our happy memories from that.
I see. And to your point of team, like, what is your piece of advice for AC Tech startups about recruitment and finding the people who aligns with the vision of the startup?
Teams are everything. Like that's not where you save money. So don't do it. Like you will lose the talent, or you will never attract the right talent. Teams are everything. It's simple as that. That's where you invest all of your money. Like overpay if you can. Like go all out, go nuts. Because ultimately the world around us changes. Any plan we have is great, but it's like at its best cute. Look at the last 2 years, right? Like if Kanoa didn't have the team that it has, we wouldn't have survived at all. Like we would not have, like we are a team that is in commercial real estate focused on office. Like
Yeah.
the last 2 years should have killed us more than once. So team is everything. Name, brand, all of those things are important to attract talent, but then you have to keep it. So Team is everything. And if you think that people are replaceable and those kinds of things, you're probably thinking about your team in an incorrect way.
I see. And w- from my limited experience, like one of the things I see is like it's very challenging to find like a successful business model for a tech startup. And if you're hiring a really good talent, like it's a good cost. Like how do you manage like the resources, the limited resources you have, but also you wanna the great team?
Yeah, I mean, this is at the core of this conversation is sort of like what's the business model of AEC companies? I like if we take a step back for a moment, we can bunch up a bunch of people on what I would call like tech enabled services, which is like some version of what existed before, but it's enabled to be delivered easily, better packaged. That's completely legitimate, by the way. People are like, oh, that's not techie, and like they can go away and say like like the whole insurance industry is tech enabled services, all of health tech is tech enabled services. Like we are a highly regulated industry, and as such, um, you know tech enabled is great and it's totally fine. Then you have what I would call sort of like traditional SaaS. um, we've had some amazing exits in that world. um, and then we have some marketplaces which Kanoa would fall under. We have who else can I think about? I mean, that might be well. And then you have like your full, yeah. Well, I would typically separate this, but then like your full stack kind of like developer manufacturer firms or companies, I would put those guys under tech enabled, to be frank. And so this was probably like the three biggest pillars of businesses, and with tech enabled and SaaS being the two biggest ones, and marketplace being like a tiny speck in the industry in the moment, which is why you're right, and we are going to be a $1 billion company. So um, we said we gotta sell stuff, and selling software is something that I think I'm particularly bad at. So I was like, maybe I can sell chairs instead. I have no idea. Anyway, but we'll get to that in a bit. But I think that most people go after this tech enabled services world, and some people go after SaaS. I think both of them are super valid. Look, the reality is that when you're doing a startup, you um, you have to really know. I like to say you have to pick um, the problem you're solving, not how you're trying to solve it. The how comes through trying to find product market fit. I see most often, and this is really hard, and it happens to all of us. Any entrepreneur out there will tell you this, but it's like, like you think that you have some sort of idea that you think will sort of like allow you to, crack in the door, an opening to be able to go in and sell something because you can do it differently. The reality is that um, there has to be a business driver. There has to be a growth driver, a problem that you find really interesting, that you're very passionate about, and then how you solve that problem will evolve. So I'd be really like hesitant to just like jump in and start building stuff and jump in and start doing all this tech work, other than being completely honest with yourself and saying, okay, this tech work is mostly to raise money or mostly for trying for product research at the moment. Those kinds of things are good. Then eventually, that becomes over time that becomes a platform or some sort of product or service or package that becomes repeatable. But it's really really hard. And so probably what you have to say is, look, the typical business, um, I would say the typical services business is low risk, low reward. Finding, like Case at the beginning, finding 10K a month from somebody to keep us fed was not that hard, right? And so most
Mhm.
companies end up being like, okay, well, let me just find like a little consulting gig and like blah blah blah. that's why. But then like scaling that to $10 million a year or $50 million a year is really hard, and
Yep.
usually translates to you being like this mega giant company that is effectively buying labor, repackaging it for a profit, and then selling it, right? And so with all of the potential issues that benefits and issues that may come with it. And so with tech, the model is fundamentally different. The model is we're going to lose money, while, or we're going to at the very least like break even, probably lose money, let's be honest, for a while we swing and miss, swing and miss, swing and miss, swing and miss, swing and miss a bunch of times, which hopefully we can then thread all of those lessons back together into something you're like, okay, now I can stand on this foundation and I've tethered myself to enough research and enough feedback and enough things that now I can like provide value in a very real way that is also scalable. That is not just me giving advice to somebody, because that's services. It's some sort of technology, some sort of framework, some sort of mechanism that will give us, that will drive you to whatever you're seeking, which ultimately it's what we would call mechanical revenue, which is the first dollar that came in the door that was automatic. And you have to do everything to get to that point. And this is where the VC model comes in, or angel investing, and all of this. It's high risk, high reward. Most of these companies don't make it. Um, but the whole point of it, the whole objective of it, is that if you do, the reward can be potentially really, really significant. And so that's where this new animal that didn't exist in the early 2000s as a company now exists out there. And so whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're trying to found a company or whether you're joining a company or you're looking for something, these two animals behave completely differently. And the experiences of working at these two companies is very, very different. Right? Your typical architecture firm, let's say, is usually 70 to 80% architects, meaning it's like what I would call single discipline. There, of course, are like architecture interiors or AEC or A&E or big A, little e, big E, little a, those kinds of things. But a product company is cross-functional, like off the bat, right? Like your small team, your core team, you may be one of two, one of three that are what we call subject matter experts, and that's it. Like it's not selling a lot of one thing. It's selling something that's packaged that that sort of it's supposed to provide again some sort of value. So pick a big problem, something that you can knock on. I like to say that like we're sort of like back in the day at Case we used to play Warcraft, and so there's a little map on the bottom right where as you are traveling around, it like begins to more of the map begins to appear. Well, that's startups, right? Like you're feeling your way in the dark. At some point, you just need to be able to make sure you don't run out of money before you find that door. Before you find a door that's unlocked that you can walk through, which gets you a little bit more money, and then another dark room that you have to walk through. And you do this over and over and over again, which is both super fun and incredibly scary, until hopefully you find daylight. And finding daylight is what I would call is product market fit. And I define finding product market fit as both repeatable business and a profitable company. I would argue that, say for example, WeWork, which I was a part of, we had repeatable business, but we weren't profitable yet. So I'm not sure we ever found product market fit. Had we not been propped up by a bunch of VC investments, we probably wouldn't have been where we were, say by 2018. And so it doesn't, finding product market fit isn't even related to how big you are. There's massive companies out there who might not even have it yet. Obviously, you want to get there as quickly as possible. Otherwise, finding money gets harder and harder. But the reality is that it's you're swinging for the fences, and that is a fundamentally different culture than going into a practice, even a digital practice, where you're like, yep, like 2 years from now, we'll be doing something very similar to what we're doing right now. In a startup, I mean, where we are 2 years from now should look very different than where we are today.
Mhm.
It's not a hope, like it should. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. Otherwise, we're not advancing. So So it's not for everybody, that's for sure.
Oh my God, that there's so many insights in that answer, and thank it's, thanks a lot for sharing. And I'm curious, like what excites you the most in the AEC tech space?
Today,
Yep.
um, oof, I would say the attention we have. Um, I have never seen so much context align itself around all of the problems, all of these physical problems, from a housing crisis to an affordability crisis to a climate crisis, to what I would call a talent crisis. All of these things are coming together to completely rewrite the rules of residential, of commercial real estate, and it's attracted a ton of investment. And so we'll see where that investment goes and how well it does or doesn't do. Really, that's up to a lot of us. Um, but the reality is that um, the world is asking for some very spatial solutions to some very spatial problems, and and it's willing to invest in it. And so, are we as an industry going to take up that challenge, or are we not? Because it's being taken up by somebody, and so
Mm.
so what's going to be the answer? I would say I'm most excited by that. It's I said this last year, and I was wrong because this year is better. but but I would say there is more stuff happening in our industry when it comes to trying to rewrite the rules in a healthier way today than there ever has been in the since I graduated college. So I'm excited about that potential. It's not one company, it's not one team. It has to be thousands. And so the more the merrier. Like the more people that decide to start their own companies, the more people that decide to be entrepreneurs, the more people that decide to join new companies, the more people that start to do different kinds of things, the better. Um, it's healthy for all of us.
Got it. And I have seen like recent a lot of developments on the spatial and generative space about products and startups. Are there any areas which not a lot of people addressing or some missed opportunities in this space?
Yeah, like thousands. um, I mean, frankly, I would say that I would say that um, there seems to be a lot of people who are trying to sell into architects and engineers. Um, I, I'm not sure that like there's a lot of amazing technology. There's not as much amazing business models. So I would say people just like get out of your comfort zone a little bit and like go out and sell into other people. And so a lot of the industry is aligned to sell effectively. It's B2B, and they don't realize it, right? Because architects and engineers and contractors all work for developers in whatever capacity. Unless you're in the single family home business, say like upscale, then you're working for developers and you're doing, so let's leave aside the single family home high end designer, which by the way has an actual direct contact with the end user and probably does better in that capacity than most of the rest of the industry who does not. And so if you take the rest of the industry, you say, look, stop selling to each other and stop selling into developers and go broader, go wider, go package something, do something where like you actually have to put a stake in the ground and have an opinion. I think a lot of what's happening right now is still very much trying to like, let's say like package consulting in a way, like
Mhm.
package consulting into software features, which is cool and it needs to happen. We all need our picks, our picks and hammers. But I would like to see more in the order of marketplaces. I think people should be working on payments in our industry. I think people should be working on credit in our industry. I think people should be working on talent in our industry. I think there's a bunch of ideas of things that would prop up our industry in ways that would be amazing, and today don't really exist. Why isn't there a startup, like an insurance startup company in our industry? Like, crazy stuff. We all talk about risk all the time. Like, okay, then go start the lemonade for AEC. Like it's right there. It's right there.
I see your point. And do you think like AI or blockchain potential, like it's gonna take a while in our industry because of the data issues, or like what's the friction do we foresee on those sectors?
I mean, I don't know that I see any friction. I think that, like, those. I mean, blockchain is just blockchain. That's like, having a reason to do something that is open. It's probably the same barrier that most other industries have. It's like, why are we doing it this way? Um, which there are some use cases out there that make sense. I think I do enjoy the amazing power that NFTs have given artists, because it does make sense to have traceable assets in that capacity. I'm sure there's probably use cases for us. I don't know. I don't like it. It's very easy though to have like technology, like cart driving the or putting the cart before the horse, if you will, like technology trying to find a solution kind of thing. Like, if you want to do research, right? That's a thing. And I think with AI, like, I mean, it kind of is all over the place already. Like, I'm not, I don't think that there's a ton of. I mean, obviously, there's a data reliance issue. Like, you need enough data to actually make any meaningful impact, of course. But um, I think outside of the world of like ground up construction, where like there's a lot of what I would call like very shallow demos about I would say in the world of like imaging and like everything that has to do with robotics, in marketplaces, in like decision support and recommendations engines. Like, there's amazing stuff out there that works already incredibly well. I mean, like, um, so I think it sort of kind of depends on what vertical or what it is that we're looking for. Um, I think if you're asking sort of like, can AI design a building, I'd be like, sure. I'm not sure how interesting that problem is today. I think that we're big believers of the concept of um, not selling hours, and so I do think that what I'm really excited about as a potential is the ability to have, little companies effectively knock out, over the next 10 or 20 years, this need for the mega firm. Like, do we really need 10,000 person companies to like do something? Feels a little bit 20th century. So I'm excited for people to try to knock at that problem, and see what happens.
Got it. And like students and young professionals like me, like when we see the case study of like Katera and WeWork, it feels like it's gonna be very challenging for a successful vertical integrated firm. So I'm curious, like, are you bullish or bearish on like those kind of startups?
Um, I mean, I don't know. I'm bullish about everything, so it's hard for me to. I I think I think that I don't know. Maybe like I am an optimist, which I guess I would have to be. But like, I don't see either of those examples as failures, right? Like, I see them more as um, like, it's just a hit and a miss, right? But like, how much further did we get, right? Like, how close are we from a a world where um, a lot of this stuff, let's say, where we can in fact actually help the 5 billion people that have or have been born since 1970. How much closer are we to solving real sustainability issues? Like, these are not small problems. I think we need, like, other than the what I would call like the the real leadership issues that both of these companies had, the which led to business model issues that were built on quicksand. But like, from a technology perspective and the objectives that they were trying to meet, I think I think that they moved the ball forward, and I think that that's amazing. And so, like, I would I would say sans the personal enrichment. Let's say that we need a lot more of that. We need not just $16 billion invested in our industry. We need 2-3 trillion dollars over the next 20-30 years to truly address decarbonization in our cities, to truly address proper housing conditions, to truly address all of these kinds of things. Because, like, we're here, like we're here. All of these people are here, and they all deserve that level of quality and standing in their day-to-day lives, and it's our industry's responsibility to provide it. And, like, that's it. Like, there's nothing else to discuss. And so, we need to go out. We need better leaders. I think maybe that's the lessons, is that we, like, right now it felt like a little bit like the Wild West, and we had some leaders who were just like, um, kind of crazy enough to go after it. It's like, okay, then that's a lesson. The problem is there. The money might be there in the future again. Let's get better leadership, because these problems have not gone anywhere. They've gotten worse since COVID.
Hmm.
So that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would like to know the inside about, let's say you had an idea about Canova. What was the framework or metrics you used to get into the prototype stage, and like how did you get like the feedback? Can you share some insights from that journey?
Like, overall, or like where what are product, how do we arrive at the product we have today, or how do we make product decisions on a daily basis?
Like, yeah, decisions level and like getting the first prototype out.
Yeah. Yeah, so Canoa's journey is really interesting. I We started actually as this, we're trying to package office solutions for small businesses. And we started I mean, we incorporated at the end of 2019. We started the company in earnest in January 2020. And 2 months later, all small businesses stopped having an office. We started at the worst possible time. We didn't intend to go out and build a space planning tool. We didn't intend to build some of this stuff. It just, we had some very difficult, like, moments where luckily we weren't, it was just me and a couple of other people, but, like, luckily we sat down and we're like, okay, our revenue just went down to effectively zero. What do we have to change? And what we said is, look, what saved us was that we were like, okay, we're passionate about decarbonizing our industry. We're passionate about retrofit. We're passionate about the power of modular and FF&E. But our core customer just got decimated. So what do we do? And we had to pivot and go, really effectively go up market into medium-sized businesses and large businesses and enterprises, which we didn't think we were going to be ready for quite some time. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, now we have to learn about them and what they need and what they're looking for, not what we thought they needed, because we've done tons of work for those kinds of companies. But in the context of COVID, everything changed, including internal organizational structures at those companies, right? And so what do they need today? What are we going to do? And so the context of the company changed completely. But again, at a level, we were still solving the same problem. We were just, a door got closed, got shut in our face, and we had to go sort of find another door. And a year on, I'm happy to report that that's working. But who knows? Like, there's Omicron, and there's going to be, at some point we restart the Greek alphabet, and we'll see what happens, right? But I do think that if we take a step back, I do think we're somewhere in the first quarter or third of a 4 to 5 year, let's call it, like, post, like, pandemic phase, And by post, I mean that we just realized that we're going to be now living with pandemics almost on a daily basis. And then that's the sort of immediate product we're serving or need we're serving while everybody reconfigures and restacks and refigures out, what their businesses looks like. And then 3 to 5 years on, and then 10 years on, there's going to be what I would call a restructuring of commercial real estate. We're going to have products for that we haven't even started work on because it would be too early. So we'll see what happens. But today we said we need speed above everything else. The most coveted thing that we need is speed. We need really high, customer success, and we need to fundamentally understand how this stuff, how we can provide value in a scalable way today. And it took us a bit, right? It took us easily 6 to 9 months to kind of like reconfigure our positioning in a way that would get us to where we are today.
Nice. And can you elaborate on the operation and how you practice at Canova? Like, are you following agile method or design sprint? Like, how are you guys working and adapting to this constant
Yeah.
changing needs?
Well, first of all, we don't practice anything because we're not a professional company. We're a product-led business. We work on sprints. We have yearly. I like to say that I like to know where I'm going to be 10 years from now and tomorrow, and the middle I don't really care about because it's mostly a lie anyway, at least in my experience. So we have yearly objectives, and then so we have 12 months, and then usually 12 weeks. And then and that breaks down even further, but like the middle can be fudged, and then we work on 2-week cycles beyond that, and that's the product group, which is about 60% of the company today, and then ops and growth and accounts. Today we're still tiny, so it's still it's very much it's very much on a week-to-week sort of thing. So we're beginning to scale. So this is going to change. We might bring some of those, some established cadence to some of the rest of the company. But the biggest team today is product, which is all technology and product design and product development, all in one.
Got it. We have one question from the viewers, like from Marcelo. Federico, do you see the metaverse integrating with the AEC industry? I mean, more into the business and serving to get stuff done and not into the social model?
I think the metaverse serves as an opportunity to change our cities in a very significant way. And I've yet to see somebody really sort of attack this, but I tweeted about it a couple of weeks ago, and I had like 0 engagement on it. so maybe it's just me. I have no idea. But there's a I think in the world that I live in, which is what's going to how people work and what's going to happen, I'm very excited about the potential to in the conversation of hybrid, in the conversation of all of this. I'm very excited about the potential to drastically, in a much faster capacity, the amount of commuting time, the amount of let's say embodied carbon that our current economy has, where you say, hey, if we sort of restack our businesses a little bit, because right now, like the up until the pandemic, the MO was like, oh, let's build a bunch of more stuff to get out of this, right? We just built it in the wrong places. Now let's build it. And there's definitely part of that. But part of it is also use patterns, right? And so we say and usually in business, it's like, well, if you have to teach anybody anything, that's a really hard lift. So don't go that way. Like you have to go after demand that is already there that just hasn't been captured yet. And so what COVID did was that all of a sudden it created a what I like to say a change of behavior. The way in which humans are now consuming cities, right, or using cities, is fundamentally different. And there's a huge opportunity there to make a huge dent, even with all of the badness about like um, what I would call sort of like metaverse, electrical usage, and everything else. But in context or in comparison to our, to like the 2 hour commuting model that we still work in the US with today, there are some pretty amazing opportunities there. And so I think, and this is something that I hope Kanoa begins to do in the future as well, but I think that we are going to begin a lot sooner than I thought engaging some of our bigger, especially tech clients, in a hybrid conversation that has to do with lowering carbon, really driven by ESG requirements, but lowering carbon in ways that are really meaningful. And one of them is going to be to provide really amazing experiences working not in the office. And so how does one do that? So translate into the metaverse. How does that translate into remote working? How does it translate into all those? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows yet, but I do think that there is some really amazing opportunities there for folks to begin to explore for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, like currently, like even I foresee like developments, and there are a lot of like blockchain pumped money into metaverse also, but also it's everyone is figuring out like why should I go in metaverse in first place? That's a question. So uh, I recall like you mentioned when like the monograph story that when you heard about that problem you invested in like first place. So what's your recipe of finding problems? Like how do you see the pain points?
Problems? No, you mean to invest in or to solve myself?
Both.
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think I wake up every morning and I just I see like I see AEC as this like gigantic um, opportunity, and I don't know. There's like I don't know. Like you probably know the numbers better than I do, but like the amount of businesses that are trying to solve any sort of aspects of it that are really sort of like deep and meaningful, it's just not that high, right? So like there's all of the there's a design problem which has a lot of attention, which is great, but but like to get one thing built you need like 10, 12 different like significant verticals, and there's very few people. So design and construction gets most of the attention. What about everything else? And so everybody's trying to automate out like laborers, which sure, okay, but like there is so much out there, and
Yeah.
so I don't know how I pick things. I personally, for Kanoa, I just picked something that I enjoy. I want to be able to get up every morning and like really have a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. And I love design, and I love building teams and building businesses, and I want to try to do something that maybe does it a little bit better than we were doing it before. And that to me is that is all of our energy collectively. That's how big this thing is. An investment, I don't really invest sort of actively. Like I just happen to know some amazing people. A lot of them have been bit by the entrepreneurial bug, and so I've given some money to some people, mostly to support them as teams. I don't do this professionally. I don't expect to ever see that money back. Um, it's I'm not an investor in that capacity. I just like I know George from Monograph, and when he joined the team and like they were raising money, I was like, of course I'll support this team. Um, there's some I would only do this because it's somebody that, or it's a team that I just really meaningfully want to get behind, and I hope that they do really really well. The problem ultimately, in some degrees, even becomes secondary. I am part of Spatial Syndicate, which by most measures is really run by Kat. So I would say I'm allowed to be in those meetings, but really I have a very uh, let's say I've been lucky enough in having done a bunch of different things that have exposed me to a ton of people. So I'm able to I think make some good introductions and sort of lead people in some ways. But that's it. I yeah.
Yeah. So, like, one thing you mentioned was crucial for you was looking at the team, and like from spatial syndicate point of view, when you have like, let's say, bunch of startups pitching to you, like, what's the
Gonna
internal
plug in while you talk.
metrics? Yeah, like, what are some things you look forward to in a startup before you invest, and what are some red flags?
Um, I mean, frankly, I again, I don't necessarily look for much. There's usually somebody that I have come across, gotten to know, that I really respect. And if I happen to have the ability to either connect them with funding or even put in some myself, do it. Again, I think we need 1,000x the number of companies in this vertical than we have today, and so like me having backed, I don't know, 3 or 4 companies is not going to do it. So like, and that, like, again, there's these mega funds out there and other, like, there's a lot of money out there that really should be going into this. So what I do quite a bit of is sit with people who are maybe trying to make the decision as to whether you should start companies or not. And I, more often than not, like, maybe don't ask me because my answer is going to be yes, do it. I don't think I don't think I've ever given the opposite advice. Either yes, start a company or join an early startup. Mostly because there's some really healthy, really mature ways to engage our industry, which have to do with like academics or academia, government, um, nonprofits, and then like the traditional firms, which we're still going to need them for quite some time. But this one's the nascent one. This is the new kid on the block, and so like the other ones already get great talent. This one needs a lot more effort, needs a lot more. So I encourage people to go that route if they're interested in it, for sure.
Nice. And since I know you are optimistic, if I find anyone who is looking for funding, I'll definitely send it to your way. So,
Amazing.
like, from your you ran Case, and then you are part of WeWork, which is like Silicon Valley startup. So, has after that experience, has your perspective towards technology changed? How you run a company or how you operate a company?
Um, yeah, I think so. So actually, both Case and WeWork were New York startups. So and Case never raised money, which is interesting. We were still 100% bootstrapped from the beginning, which I think is why it made it some of like a really interesting early story. Probably happens less and less today. Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, the the wave we rode, um, really the WeWork wave of funding, which I would call like prop tech investment 1.0, is was about um, was trying to find a that was equitable or similar to what you would find in technology. And I think that what's not happened yet, which I think is really interesting, and I think it will over the next 10 years, is that I think we're going to find a different way to measure physical businesses that are still, mega growth, um, but that aren't, always being compared back to software, which is fundamentally different because it's, like we like to say that the somebody much smarter than me said this, but like the incremental cost of adding another user is zero in technology. Well, it's not zero in the physical world. So 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 what does mega growth? What does high returns? What does profitability look like in an AEC company that is not, building one building every 7 years? That I think hasn't been really figured out yet. But there are some really amazing companies out there trying to do it. Most of them are VC backed, and so I think that the willingness is there. Some of the stuff that's happening in like product, what I would call productized housing, like not quite industrialized, even though it would include that as well, but just productizing housing. How I buy it, what it looks like, how quickly I can get it. There's plays there, and I do think that there's a lot of stuff there that we're going to learn. So we'll see. But I do think 10 years from now we're going to have a couple of exits that will be um, industry specific,
Mhm.
that will be the measuring stick for a lot of other, a lot of other sort of waves of investments that come after, that say, oh, okay, well, we're trying to reach this sort of level, because most of the things that we're measuring ourselves against at the moment are from other industries, and so that needs to change.
Got it. And I'll wrap up the interview with some non-technical rapid fire questions. But before I move on, like, is there anything on the technical side you like to share, which we didn't cover?
Uh, I mean, generally, no, probably not. If you want to be more specific with maybe, but but yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
Like
I
we
think,
didn't get a chance to talk. Like, what are the common mistakes which a AC started could make, which if you have advice, we could avoid.
yeah, the common mistake I think is not just AEC, is for everybody. I think every industry has this, which is, like um, uh, that you don't like. There's no focus on sales. I mean, honestly, this has been a like, we think that product development and packaging and technology will do all of the work. It's not that. Like, once in a while you have something, that maybe cracks that. But like, you look at companies like Monograph, you look at companies like Speckle. The reason why they're building these amazing communities, and honestly why they're having a ton of traction, is because of the constant focus on sales and marketing and community building. It's like unrelenting. And I think most companies or a lot of companies in AEC don't put the effort and focus into that. At the end of the day, sales solves all problems. So like, if you're in a technology company and you find yourself with some sort of problem, it is often a sales problem. It's not that like we don't have the right feature, we don't have that. No, it's probably a sales problem. And so, um, because we all know that, like, if you just added like a button, it's not like all of a sudden you're going to have $50 million in ARR. Like, it's not that. If it was that easy, a lot of other people would have done it. It's how do you, who are you selling to, how are you packaging it, is it properly priced, are you adding value? All of these questions are questions that, unfortunately, we think that it's like, oh, you have it and you can just put it on your shelf and you're done. No, it's also a moving target, because the context of the world is changing. And so you honestly, it's a never-ending thing, which product and technology team don't like to hear, but but it is a reality.
Mhm. All right. So my last section is like rapid fire, and you'll have like 5 to 10 seconds to answer that question, and you got to keep it brief. So let's do this. So,
Okay,
which
I was
city
not
is in
prepared
your
for this, by the way.
like which city is in your travel bucket list?
Ooh, bucket list. I'm lucky. I've been to a lot of places. I would say, can I go to ones that I've already gone to?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I love Mexico City. I love Tokyo, and I love Buenos Aires.
Nice. Any technical or business book which made a big impact in your life?
Ooh, that's a good one. Science fiction, lots of it. Foundation series, probably most of all.
Mhm. Who's your role
Which there's
model?
now there's now a series about on HBO.
Oh, yeah.
Who, who's my role model?
Hmm.
Oof. Dave Fano.
Uh, your co-founder from Case, right?
Mhm.
Nice. Yeah. Uh, oh my God, I lost on the spot. Sorry. What are your hobbies?
Uh, reading, um, walking, and probably playing video games.
Nice. Your favorite movie?
Hmm. There's a lot at the moment, Dune.
If you had unlimited time and resources, what is one thing you would do when you wake up tomorrow?
Limited time and resources. I would probably. Oof, this is a hard one. Um, I would probably. I think the fastest thing I would probably redistribute it. I would probably find a lot of people that need the money and give it away.
Mhm. What is one thing that most of the people don't know about you, but they'll be surprised if they get to know that?
Hmm. Uh, Probably that I was born in Venezuela by complete coincidence and chance. But
I see. What are three words that describes your personality?
I am a homebody, 100%. I'm not a very social person. Sorry, in like big groups. I don't like big groups. Um, and I'm claustrophobic, which is kind of a weird irony in my life.
And lastly, what is your advice to your younger self?
um, Another good question. Um, I would say probably to have jumped into what I was doing sooner, to what I'm doing now sooner. Um, I think I I think we, for some reason, it took me a while to truly engage the climate discussion. I would not change a lot. I've been lucky in life, but I would have liked to not look at this problem from the sidelines for so long.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Federico, for such an inspiring talk and sharing your knowledge and thoughts with us. I had a great time.
Amazing. Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. It's great questions too.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day.